Nitin, today we're talking about cancel culture and what better place to start with than what is your take on death penalty?
Wow. At least be Roman Polanski. At least be Vairamuthu. At least be Harvey Weinstein.
I've come to realize that the hallmark of a good leftover lasagna recording is how uncomfortable it makes me feel. And by that metric, this is
This one's up there.
super hit episode.
Leftover lasagne.
Leftover lasagna.
Lasagna, no way.
It's a type of sandwich.
Some kind of gross pasta.
Leftover
Lasagna
is a podcast hosted by
my
Nitin
charge
and Tony uncle. Leftover lasagna.
Very funny name.
Hello and welcome to Leftover Lasagna, the weekly podcast that asks the question, if every school day starts with putting students in a line for an assembly, is it any wonder that the end product is cookie cutter adults from an assembly line who are incapable of original thinking? I am Tony, the guy who was usually thrown out of the assembly because I was trying to polish my canvas shoes with a white chalk at the last minute. And joining me is the guy who was made to stand outside class at DAV Gopalapuram because when asked to suggest lines for a school anthem which included the words DAV, he went with Na Radida Varava. Say hi, Nitin Sundar.
Hi, Tony. I don't know where you came up with that. Talking of canvas shoes and chalk, I think all of us have had that rite of passage. You know what's cool though? Not school, but cool. When we were young, those canvas shoes that we used to wear were like the dullest, silliest thing that you could be spotted in, right? We all wanted fancy sports sneakers.
Yeah.
And now, 25 years later, it's these Converse canvas shoes that everyone is wearing.
Yeah. That's why it's called Converse.
Converse. And those have become like, like smart and fashionable. Initially, when that trend started, I was like, what the hell is wrong with these people? Why are they going back to these randos? And then, like everyone else, I also
now it's time for your take on Crocs and why they are so expensive and how ridiculous they look. Anyway, so Nitin, today we're talking about cancel culture and what better place to start with than what is your take on death penalty?
Wow. So firstly, talk about putting someone on the spot. No, firstly,
that is what death penalty is.
Firstly, there is this delicious irony of us talking about cancel culture a week after we cancelled our episode because we just didn't find time to record last week.
Yeah. So just to, since we are at this, right, in our episode on cliches, we basically had to record the whole second half of the episode all over again because we forgot to record, thereby recreating a cliche. In the cancel culture episode, we have cancelled the recording itself and now re-recording.
We cancelled ourselves.
Yeah. Right. So can't wait for our episode on murder. Go ahead.
So, what is my take on the death penalty? Morally, I find the idea of death penalty wrong. The idea that any human being can have control over the existence of another human being just seems morally reprehensible to me. At least that's my take.
Correct.
But I see why it exists, and I see the benefits that you reap out of having strong deterrence. And,
there are benefits. Okay.
I can see why it exists, right? There are, of course, benefits, right? I'm sure it prevents...
No, I'm questioning because death penalty is never a deterrent.
Oh, because there's no way you can repeat that crime even if you wanted to after the death penalty.
No, as in... See, it's like saying, it's like Clever Dog saying the only thing that you need to stop drinking alcohol is learn how bad alcohol is for you. Right? When you're drinking alcohol, you're not drinking thinking of the consequences of drinking. No, you're drinking for some other reason. Right?
Not true for everyone.
Death penalty. Why?
There are people...
not true for everyone, obviously. Yeah.
Potential criminals who value their life more than the benefit of the crime that they would be committing otherwise. And that's a strong enough deterrent. I do feel that the world has fewer criminals because the death penalty exists.
No, as opposed to talking in sort of anecdotal thing, there is actually clear scientific consensus that death penalty does not deter. Right? And there is enough sort of responses collected, statistically valid, to say that, some 89% of the respondents don't think that death penalty deters murder. Right? I think most countries have sort of adopted a stance to say death penalty not in case of like normal crimes, right? Only in the rarest of rare do you give it.
That's true. I don't know. Even India doesn't do the death penalty all that much anymore, right?
Rarest of
What else?
rare.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but society has tilted in the opposite direction, right? Nitin, I believe you watched a Malayalam movie which should have been a Tamil movie last week at my recommendation. It is called Janaganamana. Can you
Yeah.
briefly summarize what that movie is about?
Oh, it would be unfair to spoil that movie for people who have not watched it because it is a very twisty plot involved in the
Yeah.
movie. Janagana Mana is a courtroom drama. It's a movie about this cop who seemingly gets into trouble for standing up, to the injustices of the law. Basically, he has a bunch of criminals that he has arrested who are about to get away because of their political connections, and he takes the law into his own hands and administers instant justice in the form of an encounter killing, and he kills those criminals, right? He then gets court-martialed for the crime of having committed uh, the uh, the encounter killings, and as the viewers, we are led to sympathize with him and the choice that he made, right? And we have seen a lot of vigilante justice movies. I think as an audience in India, we've been
Yeah.
primed to accept vigilante justice, right? And here it wasn't even a
Exactly.
vigilante; it was actually a cop. And
Yeah.
encounter killings have actually been romanticized to an extent, so made to look
Exactly.
heroic on screen
Yeah.
over the years. So we actually are primed to sympathize with him. But there is it is, and then it goes to court, and there is this lawyer who comes to fight against him, right? And then there is the public prosecutor or whatever who's defending him. Now, the first red herring in this movie is that the hero of the movie is the lawyer who goes against this cop, and that's a clue. But it's a confusing clue because you really don't know where the movie is going. Eventually, what
Yeah.
happens is that it emerges that that cop was actually, he had turned a heel. He was actually in cahoots with a politician in order to bump off these so-called criminals, in order to distract the entire audience, as in the audience in the movie. It was subterfuge of some sorts to try and distract them
Yeah.
from bigger crimes that politician and the political party was trying to get away with. And
Yeah.
this lawyer who comes against him kind of shines the light on how easily we get manipulated as people, and how the people in the movie get manipulated by these moves that were placed very purposefully by the bad guys, including this cop, to try and get away with something much bigger. So the movie is not really for or against capital punishment, so must put that
Yeah.
out there. It's more about how
Yeah.
we tend to easily fall prey to narratives and don't
Yeah.
really understand what the bigger storyline that is playing out in the back. At a
Yeah.
plot level, one of the
Just
most
to,
interesting plots that I have
correct.
watched on screen.
Yeah.
Not the best movie I've watched though, and it's in fact
Correct.
very poorly directed in
Correct.
my opinion, and acted,
Correct.
and it has a lot of other flaws
Correct.
to it. But
Yeah.
if this book were a novel, I would love to read it. Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah. So the connect between the last episode and this one is that this director is called Dijo Jose Anthony, and his writer is Shaheen, one of those guys. Sorry, I forget his name. And they wrote, directed a second movie which is called Malayali from India, I want to say. A horrible movie, don't watch it. But anyway, the controversy there was apparently, connecting back to the last episode, they had flicked the entire sort of plot from someone else who had narrated the story to someone, and then they just picked it up and ran with the movie. So the reason I asked about death penalty for cancel culture is exactly this, right? That over a period of time, vigilante justice and encounters have become, massive in popularity in India, right? And if we ask possibly our older generation, they will say, readily go ahead and kill these people, right? Especially if it is one of those crimes that outrages our morality or something in that sense.
Yeah.
And two things we heard growing up, Nitin. One was that Hindi is our national language. Hindi hamara rashtra bhasha hai. I guess at some point we all heard this, which is not true. The
Yeah.
other thing that I thought was written into our sort of justice system is this line that is oft repeated, I believe, both in Malayalam and Tamil movies, which is, even if 100 culprits escape, no innocent man should be
Yeah.
punished.
Yeah.
And
I
suddenly it
don't
is
know.
turned the opposite.
Is this a line? Is this a line that you've heard a lot in Malayalam cinema? Because it's very, very
Yeah.
popular in Tamil cinema.
It is very
Noor-
popular in Malayalam cinema. Yeah,
100 குற்றவாளிங்க தப்பிக்கலாம் ஆனா ஒரு நிரபராதி கூட
correct.
தண்டிக்கப்படக்கூடாது is the line that keeps
Exactly.
coming in Tamil
Yeah.
films also. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What if it's Rajinikanth and he's punishing one innocent man? That is equivalent to punishing 100. No, so yeah, so the whole reason why this is the entry point to cancel culture really is that most of our understanding of justice as humanity is this concept of reformative justice, right? Which is that it starts with something called audi alteram partem.
This,
Here the
if
other
you
side.
have if you have an Audi car, take it to the
Yeah.
mechanic. Take your Audi car to the mechanic, get it
Correct.
altered, and then
Yeah.
it can you can have two parts, front
Change
part and
parts, yeah.
back. Yeah, change parts. Now tell us what is
Yeah.
it.
No, audi alteram partem basically means here the other side, right? So any kind of justice that you have normally takes that into account that both sides must be allowed to tell the story, and then there is a legit process through which you reach the conclusion of how to punish someone such that it is reformative, right? So the idea is that everyone has an opportunity to come back, right? You've
Yeah.
committed a crime, but as long as you serve time or reasonable punishment, then you're ready to go back into society as it were.
So Kamal Hassan,
Yeah.
Virumandi is one of the few films, I think 4 or 5 films that he's directed. We would have all heard about Rashomon, right? Which is the famous Akira Kurosawa movie where you have 3 different people give 3 different
Correct.
versions of the same event,
Correct.
right? And that movie was seminal when it came in the 40s or 50s because this multiple narrative concept of the same set of events being described through different viewpoints was something that nobody had
Right.
ever seen. So Virumandi is
Right.
sort of a tribute to Rashomon as well because there is a certain crime that happens and there are 2 people who get jailed for that crime, right? There's a first
Yeah.
accused and there's a second accused. And both of them in jail narrate exactly what happened from their different points of view, right? And the
Yeah.
beauty in this film is you actually see the same scenes play out twice, but the camera angles are different. What the camera chooses to show in each of those versions is different, etc. So it's just mind-blowing to watch that play out. But ultimately,
Yeah.
that movie is also about capital punishment because you have that first accused, which happens to be Kamal Hassan playing the titular role of Virumandi. And he's
Yeah.
he's in the gallows, right? He's about to serve the death sentence. And then something happens after he tells out his story, something's changed and the movie changes. So, I mean, highly recommend the movie. And the movie obviously comes down very strongly against capital punishment as a means of,
Yeah.
restorative justice. And I think, just one
Interesting.
final thought on capital punishment itself, right? And especially looking at the evidence you just shared, which I did not know, the scientific evidence that you shared, which proves that capital
Yeah.
punishment does not actually reduce crime. The only reason it then exists is to kind of
Yeah.
satisfy our own moral thirst, or it's more to make the
Exactly.
survivors feel better about what has happened,
Right.
rather than actually make any change
Right.
to the way the world would function in the future, right? In that sense, it is no different
Right.
from something like, say, blood money, right? Which exists
Right.
as a concept of a bizarre concept of justice in some parts of the world. But,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I just realized I had said reformative justice instead of restorative justice. And that's a key difference, right? It is restorative justice as opposed to like traditional form of justice, which focuses on retribution. But again, the
Yes.
first point of restorative justice is that whatever harm has been done to the victim has to be
Yeah.
not necessarily compensated, but to
Closure. At
repair.
least.
Yeah, repair the damage in some senses done to the victim, right? So that
Yeah.
is the first part. No, so I really wanted to talk about the parts about Janaganamana because it starts out where you are rooting for the encounter killing in some senses, right? You're like, obviously this needs to be done, which is what is. I mean, death penalty is a simpler thing in that sense, right? It's a much more basic argument.
Yeah.
Encounter killing is the other one, right? And which people have taken a fancy to, right? And that is, in some senses, what cancel culture is, right? This is a very cancelable take I'm putting out there now. But what is your take on cancel culture?
Yeah, this is a very, very long-winded way to get to cancel culture, but let's make it work. So see, if we were talking about encounter killing, right? At least there,
Hmm.
the concept of encounter killing is different from vigilante justice in that the people who get to exercise that law are still guardians of the law, so to speak, right? It's the cops
Yeah.
with guns who
Yeah.
actually pull it off, and not the common man out there.
Yeah.
So I would actually liken cancel culture more to vigilante justice, or rather
Correct.
mob justice. Really,
That
it's
is what
actually
I'm
mob
saying.
justice. It's mob justice
Yeah.
rather than vigilante justice or even
Of course.
encounter
Yeah. Correct.
killing.
Yeah.
And the problem with mob justice,
Wait,
which we have spoken about,
let me offer you another alternative way into this, right? Which is to
yeah,
say, who do you think is tougher on terror, India or the US?
I would imagine the US, because India is
Correct.
really
And
not
who
good at anything it does.
who
Yeah.
sort of which country do you think delivers justice as far as terror acts are concerned, India or the US? Right. The reason I'm asking is,
Yeah.
some 10, 12 years ago, one of the trending things on Twitter was how Kasab is being fed biryani, right? That it's been dragging on forever, nothing has happened, that, this, and the other. But obviously, India finally carried out the sentence, death penalty, etc. And that case was closed, as opposed to the latest series of serial, which talks about Guantanamo Bay, right?
Yeah.
And how even
Serial,
the
just to
highest
serial is the serial podcast.
yeah,
Just
in
so
the
our
in the
listeners know
interest
what we are
of
talking
plugging
about.
in the interest of plugging
Even more
podcast more famous than us.
Yeah. The serial podcast really is the podcast that, if you're new to podcasts, you probably haven't heard of. But if you were around 10 years back when podcasts really had a moment, their first big moment, inflection point, serial was the podcast that made them big. And they've been around now. They've done like 4 seasons. They typically do true crime and investigative journalism. So the latest season of serial is on Guantanamo Bay, which is, of course, the what do you call it? Maximum security detention facility that the United States has in the country of Cuba, which is strange. I don't know why they don't have it on their own shores, but
It's not even a maximum it's a black site, right? I think in the starting they denied the existence of something like Gitmo, as it's called, right? And then it sort of changed into a place where no one could shut it down. Obama initially wanted to, but then couldn't, and it still exists. And the point is that KSM or like any of the closest people who have been implicated to this thing have still not been sentenced, or that cases have not yet been closed, right? And
who is
basically
KSM?
the whole thing, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the orchestrator of 9/11. Right?
Okay.
He's the guy who basically did the whole thing. So there's one episode which was played on This American Life, wherein actually there is a group of survivors' families, right, that actually get together every week, and Sarah Koenig is listening
Sarah
in
Koenig,
on their conversations, and Dana Chivis, they're listening in on the conversation, and they expect it to be like frustration at the whole thing, etc., etc. But really, they are there are two parts of it. One is they are more worried about how these guys are being treated, saying they are also victims of the system in some sense because they've not been punished yet, and also that this will never see closure. Right? They are actually asking for plea deals so that we can close the case and move on. Whereas sort of right-wing elements in the US are like, no way, we have to sort of take them towards death penalty. And nothing's happened yet, right? And 9/11 was obviously 2001, right? It's been 23 years, and they don't hope for anything to happen. And even the children of some of the 9/11 deceased have now passed away, right? That's how long it's been. So they don't have any scope for seeing this happening, right? So
all they really want is
stance on.
All they really want is closure, right? At the end of the day, you want this chapter to end, and the reason any kind of punishment exists, right? It's in some sense restorative, but not really restorative justice also, because you really can't reverse the clock, right? As someone has been wrong, they have been wrong, but you probably help them feel better and help them move on by taking some kind of action at the end of it. And in this case, it's very magnanimous actually of the survivors' families here, or rather the victims' families here, to ask for closure in some way, and not necessarily in the form of punishment for the people who carried out those attacks. But
restorative justice, right? And I think 2 points to what we discussed. One is the knee-jerk reaction, such as quick and swift killing of people or end to it, has two problems. One is that it doesn't give you time to identify the real culprit, as it played out in some of the movies that we discussed. Second is that it doesn't really do anything other than, in some senses, satiate our thirst for retribution, right? Which is
Yeah.
really not what justice should be about. That is why I thought maybe this is an interesting way into cancel culture in that sense.
Perfect. Well done. So let's take it into cancel culture then, Tony. I have a question for you. Do you wear Puma sneakers? Or
I have worn Puma sneakers, yes.
do you these days? Have you stopped wearing or endorsing Puma products? Are all your
No,
fans
not
seeing you
really.
endorse Puma in TV
Puma,
commercials
oh,
these
like
days?
that,
Or
no.
have you stopped? You haven't?
No, not really. No. I mean, there is no particular preference for Puma or Adidas or Nike or anything.
Like
Or
anybody
what
else.
is the other one? Converse.
Yeah, whichever is on discount, we shall purchase. So I realized recently that during my running days, for some reason I used to have a lot of derision for people who wear Puma sneakers when they run, because somewhere I read that Asics is the brand that you should wear in case you're running, because they make better running shoes. It's all random shit anyway, by the way.
Oh, okay.
I later on, as you know, you're reading Born to Run now, so you will know that I'm into barefoot running. So I believe that the human body is designed to run without shoes, anyways. So, but anyway, Puma has been cancelled big time. For the record, I wear a lot of Puma these days. So the football cleats I wear
Because
when I
they've
play
been
Ultimate.
cancelled, is it?
No, I just no. They happen to be on discount. That's always the reason.
Correct.
So the football cleats I wear when I play Ultimate Frisbee, which I do like twice or thrice a week these days, happen to be Puma, and much of the stuff I wear is also Puma. Puma has been cancelled big time in the last, typically in the last 12 months. You don't know
Why?
about this.
No.
So Puma was the and continues to be the jersey sponsor of the Israel football team.
Oh,
And,
okay.
And they have said that they're actually not going to renew their contract going forward because it's anyway coming up for a renewal, etc. I don't know if Israel actually plays a lot of football these days with Puma jerseys on, but the fact that the Puma used to at some stage sponsor the Israel football team when Israel was not a cancelable country yet means that en masse across the world, lots of people have boycotted Puma as a brand. And this has actually hit their bottom line in a big way. So yeah, there you go. That's your trivia for the day. What is this, Tony? I expect you to be more worldly aware of things happening around us.
Who's the founder of Puma?
Oh, there is the story, right? Name. It was the same village in Germany.
Give me his full name.
Mr. Pungodai Maran. No idea.
Okay, I'll give it easier. Who is the founder of Adidas? Give me his full name.
All day I dream about sports.
Adidas.
They're brothers.
No?
Adidas,
Adolf Dassler is Adidas and Puma is Rudolf Dassler.
They're brothers.
They're brothers, yeah. It's like Poppy Kuda and John's Kuda.
Sorry, over there.
You don't know what? You haven't used Poppy and John's umbrellas?
I've only used Mufa and John's tweets, but I've not used Poppy and John's umbrellas.
Poppy and John's umbrellas, man. Come on.
Anyway. This must be some random Kerala rain sound funda which nobody outside of Kerala knows of.
Because we have the best trains, we also have the best umbrellas.
Okay. Weird flex, but okay. No, but which of the two is better?
Oh, no. It's like, what?
They're both.
Doesn't matter, but whatever is our discount. No, but before we get into this Puma side of things, right, I want to point you to another movie which we watched, which is Atom, right? And I mean, I really don't want to spoil this movie for our audience, but it's highly recommended. So the opposite side of when we talk about it, justice needs to be restorative and all of that, is things like Atom, things like what happened with the Pune Porsche guy who was like asked to write an essay on road safety or something. And the whole idea that the system itself does not punish crimes if they are, committed by people who hold the traditional power, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is an interesting sort of counter to what we were discussing. So
it's a very cynical and true and cynical take
on
the world.
Cynical?
Is that it is. I mean, it's cynical because it's no, it's not cynical. I mean, I'm cynical because it is true. Is what I was trying to say. And in that regard, very, very happy to see that Donald Trump has actually been sentenced. Right, he's been caught for because and I read this very interesting line somewhere online a couple of days back. So Donald Trump was not getting away because he was president. But Donald Trump became president so that he can get away, because that was the only way
Oh,
that he
wow.
could. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And eventually, it's nice to see that law caught up with him. Though there was some interesting backlash there also, because the jury that convicted him, right,
Yeah.
was an all black jury, and so he actually had in a sense, a very unfair trial, because the people who eventually called the shots on what his ruling would be were not the people who would identify with him. And it's also very possible that a differently set up jury would have probably acquitted him. Right, this is true.
Oh.
So, I
Hmm.
mean, broad take, justice really doesn't exist, is my sad take on this world. It is a very
Yeah.
weird sort of way in which we administer and run justice, and we should try and live our lives in ways that the law never has to come to our defense, because it typically won't. Is my cynical take on all of this.
If you're existing in a society, you have a social contract, right? And the social contract basically says that if a crime is committed against you, there is a just way in which that would be repaired. Right? That is the whole essence of why we continue to exist in a civil society, as it were. But if that gets broken, that's when you have these tendencies towards sort of looking at what is the alternative. Like,
Yeah.
for example, the whole Me Too movement came about as a very strong backlash against what's been happening for years together, right? In the professional setting, as far as women in the workforce were concerned.
Yeah.
And realistically, I mean, what could someone do, right, in that sense? So it
Yeah.
needed some kind of strong pushback, at least, to bring it to light in that sense.
Exactly. And it wasn't law that brought stuff to the light, right? Ultimately, it was a people's movement, and
Yeah.
that's the sad reality of how things are. Because if you have any kind of power, you will tend
Yeah.
to get away with things, right? And in this case, the gender imbalance, the power that men
Yeah.
have over women, over the years, just gave them an advantage and allowed them to get away with so much, which is sad.
Yeah. No, so I'm saying that the layers are, layer one is you assume baseline justice for anyone, right? If something
Yeah.
wrong is done to you, there is restorative justice. If that doesn't happen systemically, obviously there will be a pushback from people who are most affected, right? And that becomes layer two, which is your Me Too moments of sort, right? Where
Yeah.
really you have documented evidence of men having committed really horrible things.
Yeah.
And there needs
there
to
are
be
many
some
examples, right?
accountability at time. Yeah.
And there are many examples, right? There's Black Lives Matter, which again was that kind of a moment. There was
Yeah.
the Arab Spring, right? Which, of course, sadly eventually fizzled out. But all of these are
Yeah.
examples of a flashpoint getting reached where people's movements try and make changes to the
Yeah.
status quo. Yeah.
And I think that is important, right? But I thought what you were getting to was level 3, right? Where you're saying that there is a positive rub off by being seen as the person who champions these causes, that some of this thing becomes performative, right? Like, I am the person who doesn't wear Puma, right? If it's fine if you don't wear Puma because of that reason, but do you really need to advertise it, right? That is probably what you're asking.
So ultimately, there's another, in the context of all of this, in the days before the internet existed, right? If you had to be a good person, you had to do good things. Now, with the internet, if you want to be seen as a good person, you don't necessarily have to do good things. You just have to say the right stuff, and the internet will do the rest of its work for you. And my issue with cancel culture is that it has weaponized a lot of us into saying and performing for the masses, as opposed to actually doing anything or creating actual change.
Correct.
And there's this very lovely Barack Obama speech where I think this was at the Obama Academy or something that he was speaking, where he talks about this. And how he says,
Can you play it?
There he puts me in the spot again.
This idea of purity and you're never compromised and you're always politically woke and all that stuff, you should get over that quickly. The world is messy. There are ambiguities. People who do really good stuff have flaws. People who you are fighting may love their kids. And, share certain things with you. And I think that one danger I see among young people, particularly on college campuses, Malia and I talk about this. Yara goes to school with my daughter. But I do get a sense sometimes now among certain young people, and this is accelerated by social media, there is this sense sometimes of the way of me making change is to be as judgmental as possible about other people. And that's enough. Like if I tweet or hashtag about how you didn't do something right or used the wrong verb, or then I can sit back and feel pretty good about myself because, man, you see how woke I was? I called you out. I'm going to get on TV, watch my show, watch Grownish. You know, that's not activism. That's not bringing about change. You know, if all you're doing is casting stones, you know, you're probably not going to get that far. That's easy to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He says it quite nicely, doesn't
No,
he? And what I really liked
absolutely.
about that, right? So, couple of things that I really liked about what Obama said there. When we cancel people, right, what we really do, or we cancel movements or whatever, we take one aspect of their personality, real or imagined,
Yeah.
or one attribute or one action which they might have even
Yeah.
performed without too much of thought, and we use
Yeah.
that to sully their entire personality, their entire existence, their entire image, right? We basically put them in the doghouse forever
Yeah.
and make a big song and dance out of it, and it becomes a performative mob justice, right? We've spoken about this in the past. When a mob gets together, individuals do things that they otherwise would not do. They're emboldened by being a part of the mob. So you have problem here from two
Yeah.
sides. One is
Yeah.
you becoming a part of a big group and doing something you would not have otherwise done. You taking a very small aspect of another person and blowing it up to
Yeah.
be their entire personality, right? Both of these are problems.
Yeah.
And Obama's point is, in the real world, all of us have issues, right? Everyone has problems, and there are many aspects of the people we cancel that we would actually identify with, which we would empathize and sympathize with, and we are just not
Yeah.
even considering all of that when
Yeah.
we do what we're doing. And the third thing, the most important thing he says is, it doesn't really make any difference to the world. If you want to actually change things in the world, you performing these cancel activities is not really going to make any change. Yeah, sure, you can feel good about it. You've telegraphed a certain sense of superiority about yourself, but you're not changing anything in the world.
Yeah. No, I think this is best summarized by the video of Bangladeshi commentator interviewing Andre Russell. Last match you perform. What has happened? Huh?
Please explain how it is related to that. Firstly, should we all be cancelled for making fun of that Bangladeshi commentator who was doing his best
Oh,
in
this
the
is a good one.
circumstances?
This is a good
Oh,
one. This is a good
you've not seen this one do the rounds. I think I got cancelled for resharing
Oh,
this
really?
tweet a couple of times by a couple of
Oh,
people.
wow. Okay.
Like, oh,
Interesting.
you
Interesting.
ivory towers, English speaking losers, Asians looking down upon other Asians. That is why this world is, where it is. What do you mean?
Just to give context to our just to give context
Yeah.
to our non-cricket watching audience, I think we'll just insert that clip.
BPL all match your perform this happening. Final match your perform this happening.
Final match I perform.
Final match your perform.
I'm happy, obviously.
Final match your perform. What happening?
Huh?
Final match your perform. What happening?
What do you mean?
Final match your perform. Satisfied.
Also, this is basically, it was a Bangladeshi commentator, right? Or like
At the
journalist
Bangladesh
who
Premier
was-
League, which is I think the biggest T20 league in Bangladesh. So I think this was at the end of their tournament.
Yeah, the word premier is a giveaway. Like, it's probably the number one.
Let's not go there. But I think this was at the end of their tournament or their final a year or a couple of years back. And this Bangladeshi journalist, I think, had been assigned to this beat. He was not very good with his English, probably a Bangladeshi reporter rather than an English reporter, but he was doing his best to try and interview some of the players. And these were top international players like Andre Russell from the West Indies, Moeen Ali, Sunil Narayan, also from the West Indies. And he was asking them, how they felt the match went. And they could not understand what he was saying because what he was saying was actually gibberish.
Yeah.
It was tough to make sense of what he was saying, but it's now a very viral video. But Tony and me are part of a cricket WhatsApp group where stuff like this gets shared and we have a big laugh all the time. But we have all been cancelled because it's not okay to make fun of people for their accents. But there you go.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 or 3 things that I have to say before I lose my train of thought. One is obviously, I mean, the Obama summary can just be that, right? Final match, you perform. What has happened? Your performative doesn't do anything to the world.
Yeah.
The world is like Andre Russell asking, "What?" Like it doesn't.
What do
care
you
at all,
mean?
right? Yeah. What do you mean? The second aspect, I mean, sometimes it's just things are just funny, man. Like if someone falls down, also I will laugh, right? My
Yeah.
immediate response will be to laugh. It doesn't mean like I don't care about the person or his injury or something like that. But
Yeah.
sometimes things are just funny on their own accord, right? Not everything has to have a moral this thing to it. But the other thing that I wanted to say was obviously we canceled last week's recording because I was, extremely high on an unexpected result in the Indian elections. Right? Obviously, the incumbents have still gone back to power. The ministers are the same, etc., etc. But the environment has changed significantly, right? And for two reasons. I believe that I grew up on Twitter, right? Like my cues to atheism and all of those happen through Twitter only. And
Oh,
the reason why
interesting. I didn't know that.
yeah,
I didn't know that.
so there
Interesting.
used to be there. I mean, basically those formative years when I just gotten out of engineering and before MBA, there were 2 years. Basically, I was in a software company, which meant I was on the internet all the time. I was at the right place at the right time, where everyone could talk about everything, and there used to be some really, guiding lights, right? People who were much older to you, who would sort of speak about things, and you took things from it, right? And then Twitter went to shit for about 10 years. But what is really heartening about last week's result was that it seems like Twitter is becoming that place again, right? Where people are, sort of indulging in humor of everything. And more importantly, whenever something happens now, it's no longer that liberals are one sort of
Yeah.
cluster, right? Famously, the most interesting characteristics of liberals is that if there are 100 people, there will be 100 different takes, right? And that is what
Yeah.
I love. And that played out very well when Kangana Ranaut got slapped by some CISF officer last week, right? And the really good part about it is that was liberals only on both sides saying, some of them are like, it's okay occasionally if a Nazi gets slapped, and the others are like, obviously none of this is valid, right? Like you can't just go around violating someone's physical space or indulging in violence in that sense. So I really, really loved that part of where we've come to, right? I think that's the opposite of what cancel culture is, which is a monolith that says,
Yeah, which is
white
like a
people.
one size fits all. You take a bazooka to a knife fight and shoot down everything, which is what cancel
Yeah.
culture is. I mixed up that
Yeah.
metaphor so much that I don't even know what it is anymore. But yeah, metaphor of Theseus.
Bazinga. Bazinga.
Bazinga.
No, but so the next layer that I wanted to get to is that obviously, therefore, there seemed like there's a cultural movement where by being performative, you are getting certain social credit. Right?
Yeah.
And obviously, this has reached its logical endpoint when brands try to cash in on it, right? Including this absolutely like bizarre tweet from Zomato, right? Which basically asked people not to order during lunchtime unless it was absolutely necessary, right? And then back from good old Twitter days, Sahil Riswan actually had the perfect response to this, right?
But tell me one thing. Why did they ask people not to order unless absolutely necessary?
Because it is extremely hot, right? This was on June 2nd.
Oh, okay.
Temperatures across India were soaring. People were, some of them were dying of heat strokes, etc., etc. And they like Zomato's tweet: please avoid ordering during peak afternoon unless absolutely necessary. To which Sahil Riswan has quoted this beautiful thing, right? Which is, Biden is always tweeting shit like, who the hell is the president? I'd like to have a word with him. And
be the change you want to be. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this elevation of Zomato's, right? I think that is the complete opposite of what where cancel culture has led us to, which is performative justice in that sense.
Yeah, and
Not performative justice, performative tweeting for
this is just
whatever.
moment marketing. It's broadly moment marketing, right? You take the opportunity to create some content around some dominant theme that's out there and hope to
Yeah.
catch something for your brand. And sometimes it backfires, sadly, as it did for Zomato here and for Bombay Shaving Company when
Yeah.
they put out that ad that we have spoken about. But the question is this, right? If now to take the second level here, okay, some people are trying hard to be performative and it's backfiring on them.
Hmm.
Should we cancel them
Hmm.
for these takes though, or would that should we cancel Bombay Shaving Company and Zomato for being tone deaf in their efforts to be woke and whatever, run with it?
No, I mean,
No, the answer is obviously no. It's a rhetoric question.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. But yeah.
Yeah. No, I think broadly what we're saying is that everything is messy and it should be. Right? And
Yeah.
like from the volume of stuff you and I have put out on the internet, Nitin, there will be like
Oh,
100
yes.
things for which we should be cancelled. Right? Like obviously,
Yeah.
like I have tweets
Oh.
dating back to way back when, right? Like 20 years ago and so on.
This is very true. Forget even tweets, right? I know that my thoughts, even now, are not clean. Like if I were to say everything that is in my mind, I would be cancelled in no time. This is probably true for most
Yeah.
people, right?
Yeah.
What is growing up except learning how to wear the right mask so that people don't know
Ooh.
who exactly you are, right? And I'm sure, and by mathematical induction, if it's true for me and it's true for you, it's probably true for everyone out there that everyone is projecting a certain image of themselves all the time, right? So we
Yeah.
probably all are at some levels very wild monsters. So yeah,
Yeah.
and you're right. Tweets, especially in the age of the internet, your entire DNA is out there, and if people wanted to go
Yeah.
and find dirt on you, it's very easy to do that from something you said when you were younger
Yeah.
and didn't really know the world.
Correct.
That's the other thing, right?
Yeah.
People grow, people change with life, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure one of the topics you wanted to talk about today was Tintin. So tell us about Tintin, Tony.
This is just about the masks that we wear and all, right? And what Nitin is conveniently hiding. I'm sure our dear viewers haven't had the opportunity to examine Nitin's body as closely as I have. He's got one tattoo on his body, which is of Tintin and Snowy, right?
There you go. It's right there. That's Tintin and Snowy on my left forearm. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So one of the news that came this week was about how the Belgium football team's jersey is actually modeled around Tintin, right? And you were very happy about it, Nitin.
Yeah.
But the question I have for you is obviously Herge was not necessarily a very
he had a checkered history
character, right? Yeah.
He had a checkered history.
He had a checkered history. He was a racist. He was racist, right? Let's just be very clear about that. And when you talk about Belgium, what people don't obviously talk about a lot is the kind of horrific massacres they did in Congo. And one of the worst Tintins to have ever existed is Tintin in Congo, which basically sort of characterizes a whole community of people as uncouth and what do you call it? And all of that, right? So I wanted to ask you.
In fact, oh yeah, absolutely, right. So Tintin in Congo, like you mentioned, is perhaps the most problematic of all of Tintin's 23, 24 works. But there is more, right? So there are multiple. I don't remember now. I mean, if I should probably reread the box set that I have. My son is reading Tintin these days, but I don't know if the N word actually gets used casually in Tintin or not. I believe it does, but I definitely do remember Creoles, for instance, being depicted in a certain, not very flattering light. There is also one of the popular books, Tintin. I mean, they're all popular, but in one of Tintin's books, which is The Shooting Star, which is about a meteorite that has landed in an island, and there are two teams that are racing to try and get to the meteorite because they're going to get a lot of important material, etc., from it. So there's the good team, which Tintin is a part of, and then there is another team which is which is actually led by a Jewish person, right? And he's depicted with a hook nose, with a cunning sort of countenance, etc. So that's the slightly more casual sort of racism that is thrown into some of Tintin's works, right? And the early works at least. But a lot of these books, and the interesting thing about Harj, who is actually George Remy, that's his name, known in English as Herge, Herge. So he was actually writing these, at least the first set of Tintins was during the Nazi kind of rule, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the content that he ended up putting out was safe for the time that he was living in, but probably not on the right side of history, right? Let's put it that way. Now, in his defense, what he said was, see, during the Nazi era, carpenters were leading their lives, right? And they were carpenting in the Nazi era. Plumbers were plumbing in the Nazi era.
Carpenting.
Yeah.
They were carpenting.
Yeah. His point was, as a creator of comics, I was doing my job in a way that would let me survive in that world where I was living. But people tend to look at my work unkindly, whereas everyone who was out there in that society was doing these things, right? Anyway, I'm not here to defend Harj. I mean, I'm a huge fan of his work, and I only found out about the racist history much later. And as a kid, when I read Tintin, also, I don't think too much of the racism actually got to me. Though there are certain books, at least the early books, Tintin in America, for instance, the one I mentioned, Shooting Star, etc. There are, if you go back and read them now, you will actually notice that there is very blatant racism in that. But so what happened after the Nazi rule got overthrown was that Harj was put on this list of people who had been racist in the regime, right? It was kind of a blacklist of sort, right? So he was actually shamed, in a sense. He was shamed during his lifetime for having been an endorser and even a champion of the Aryan supremacy movement, because he's put out anti-Semitic thoughts and racist thoughts in his work. A couple of years after that, he was actually given the opportunity to rehabilitate, right? So the people who cancelled him, so to speak, came and told him, okay, we'll get all of that expunged now. It's fine. You come back and restart Tintin for us, but you do it for our magazine. You do it for the magazine that we have launched, which is, a more left-leaning, a more anti sort of Aryan supremacy theory-based movement that we are a part of. And true to his word, Harj actually was like, I'm very happy to do that, right? And I also, I don't know if he really meant it or not, but I believe that he actually changed some of his points of view. So if you see the latter works of Harj's Hoover, right? So the latter books of Tintin, so there's Prisoners of the Sun. Harj's, I can't even say this anymore. I'm just going to call him George Remy going forward.
Hey, you should have cancelled me for making fun of your accent.
Yeah, it's okay with you. It's fine. I mean, a Mallu cancelling another Mallu for his accent is like, two blind people leading each other down the Manjumel ravine. But anyway, coming back. So if you look at the latter books, right? So Prisoners of the Sun is set in, I think, the Aztec Empire, where they go and try and, there's an adventure where Tintin and Captain Haddock land up in South America. But it actually it deals with the indigenous race of that country very, very respectfully. And later in his life, in fact, RJ even met a Chinese person who completely changed his attitude towards the Chinese people. And one of his early books was Blue Lotus, which again has a lot of racism in it. One of his later books was Tintin in Tibet, where he actually has this character who's modeled on this great friend that Hertz got later in his life. And it shows Chinese people in very positive light. So here's an example of a person who, through the course of his life, the cynical take would be to say that he changed as the winds blew, right? So he was pro a certain empire, and then he became pro a certain different way of living. My more considerate, sympathetic take would be that here's a person who actually changed through the course of his life because he was given an opportunity. And hence here we are. But the bigger question, of course, is when we know that Harj at some stage was a racist, should we have cancelled all of Tintin altogether? And the answer is a resounding no, because my son enjoys reading Tintin and Tintin rocks. So down with cancel culture and give your authors a chance to become better people.
So there are two things you're saying here, right? One is separate the art from the artist, and also that artists can grow over a period of time, right? And no one is a monolith. And the hope is that you're given time to change, right? And you're given circumstances to change. The second part is important. I'll come to that. But the first part is around asking
art and
the
artist.
question. Therefore, what about Tintin in Congo? Is it something that you'll still read or not read?
What about A.R. Rahman songs that were penned by Vairmuthu? Should I listen to them or not?
No,
because the greatest songs. How is it different? Because if I were to cancel,
the point is that Tintin in Congo, the content actually is still racist, right? In this given time and space.
By the way, there was an attempt to try and change the panels of Tintin in Congo to try and. I think Harj himself actually. I think the current versions that are out there are actually cleaner than the original manuscripts that were published back then. But should I read Tintin in Congo? I don't know. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's actually not one of the more memorable Tintins, by the way.
So on the second part, right, that there you really hope that people are allowed to change and have the time and space to change, also brings us back to stage one. Okay, this is messy, very messy. I'm telling you right off the bat. So there's a certain amount of privilege associated with cancel culture itself, right? For instance, if you were boys who grew up in the 90s or the 80s or the 2000s, and you were looking at movies like, let us say, in Harihar Nagar, where there are 4 men who are literally stalking a girl, right? And
this is again a Malayalam film. I think you have
Malayalam
to clarify
movie.
for our listeners.
Yeah, no. I mean, these are tropes that play out in across languages, right? It is language agnostic.
Stalking.
Four guys basically stalking a girl, and sort of their peak moment is when they take turns to sort of peek into her shower as she's taking a shower, right? And they don't succeed, etc. But it's all shown in a funny sort of manner, as if this is what boys do, right? And you've grown up in that era, and suddenly you're thrown into the whole cancel culture era, and there's a huge shock of cultures that happen, right, without being exposed to elementary, one would assume, concepts like consent, right? And you just take it for granted that everyone has the same level of understanding of these different things, right? But realistically, I think the only way to go about it is to say that there is asymmetry in what morals we are taught, what fundamentals we are taught, both by virtue of where we are born and the kind of content that we consume. But at some point, it becomes incumbent on you to sort of learn about these things and sort of take a different view.
This is interesting for a different reason as well, right? So one is stalking, of course, like encounter killings is a trope in Indian cinema that has got needlessly valorized or even made not necessarily valorized. There is this whole naughtiness associated with it, mostly, right? But it is good naughty. It's considered okay to for men to be stalking women and for being like actually eve teasing is the word. Eve teasing, by the way, is an Indian term. It's not a term that's used anywhere else in the world, because everywhere else that is just plain stalking and abuse. Right? We've just come up with a slightly softer sounding word to pass away a crime as something that's okay.
So I'm just talking about how it is messy, right? And like not everyone has the same understanding. I think the best sorry to go back to Premalu on this, right? It has the best way of dealing with these things in a subtle manner, and also being the most profound, right? So basically, there is this scene where our protagonist is, sort of confessing his crush on the girl to her friend, right? And she's like, "What have you been thinking? Like, she just thought you were a friend, and on top of this, you've come and taken a house right next to us. This is stalking. Do you even know what stalking is?" And then Sachin is like, "I know what stalking is. I've invested money in it and I've lost lots of money also. So don't tell me." She's like, no, that is stock markets. He's like, "Oh, what is stalking?" He's not even aware. Okay. But then the best part is his best friend, Amal Davis, who's always called Amal Davis, like Nitin Sundar is called Nitin Sundar, tells him that they are using such, scary words like stalking. But basically what it means is unless and until she reaches out to you again, never get in touch with her, right? And I feel like it's beautifully handled to sort of say the understanding that this person has versus what she's experiencing and how they may not correlate. And the best advice to say, it is about consent. So, unless she talks to you, maybe don't do it, right? So don't be that guy.
It's beautiful.
So just on this stalker trope, right? That is basic. But one thing that has happened is the jilted lover has become a very popular sort of thing, right? To say that if a girl breaks up with you, then like she is horrible and all of that, right? Well, and the biggest example of cancel culture in these situations is acid attacks on women, right? Which actually happen, which is like horrifying, right? And that is in some senses like where you have to sort of take stock and say, maybe some of these things are not okay. So
No, of course it's not okay. That's just bad culture, bad pop culture. Let's put it that way. And I would
correct.
put it back on what passes off for pop culture in India, right? And I'm sure
Yeah.
other countries have their own problems as well. But Indian cinema, I think, needs to be cancelled or not.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
needs to be given
Yeah.
a chance to rehabilitate itself, because we need more movies like Premalu that actually are sensitive
Yeah.
and put out content that can help people become better versions of what they can be, rather than
Yeah. I
valorizing
think overall
mediocre
in
concepts.
Indian pop culture, it's a very badly self-aware take, is that the writing rooms need more diversity, right? As two
Yeah.
privileged males running a podcast in which opinions are put out only by two privileged males, Nitin, I feel like we should be the champions of diversity in writers' rooms.
We
To
are
say,
absolutely.
bring in
Bring
women,
in someone with a
right?
pink shirt. Yeah. To get more points of view.
No, bring in women, and I mean bring in all sorts of
Yeah.
perspectives, right? And that's the only way to
Absolutely.
change. But I don't
Yeah.
think until the market demands it, it'll change, right? So, but just going back to Herj and your thing about how he changed. I think the interesting thing that will play out right now in Indian media and Twitter is that we have memory of the last 10 years where what guy in the media has said what, right? And we also
Yeah.
have a very unforgiving liberal crowd on Twitter, me included,
Yes.
who are not going to let them get away with it, right? Like if Rajdeep Sardesai suddenly
Yeah.
stands up and says, I've been the champion of liberals for so long, putting my things at stake, we'll be like, hey, fuck off, dude. What have you done? And not only that, you can't suddenly say, I'm a liberal now, right? You have to have a demonstrated years of sort of showing that you have changed, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it was a pressure of the regime or whatever, but right now you are no longer under that pressure. So if you want to stake claim to being a better person, then a track record is essential.
Yeah. I mean, my more unsympathetic take over there will be, we really have no reason to, to
Correct.
put up with someone like a Rajdeep Sardesai, because unlike Harj, he's not really
Yeah.
creating any art that is worth our time anyway. So it's okay to
No,
castigate him to the
your take was that
dung heap.
Herj said to survive I needed to do this, right? Which is exactly
Yeah.
what Rajdeep will also say, that to
Except
draw a
Rajdeep is
salary,
not
I
an
had to
artist
do
also.
that.
So fair.
Yeah,
But
that's
except
okay,
that Rajdeep
I
is not
mean,
even yeah. At least create something that's worth my time. At least be Roman Polanski. At least be Vairamuthu. At least be Harvey Weinstein. I have a massive
wow.
problem. Oh, absolutely. So let's come to art versus the artist, right? So Pulp Fiction and a lot of the great Quentin Tarantino movies are some of my favorite movies of all time, right?
Yeah.
Those movies are all now were all produced by Weinstein Company, which is Harvey Weinstein's company, right? Now, after he got caught in the Me Too movement, he's of course in prison now and has been cancelled and whatnot. Should I stop watching those movies? Because I absolutely cannot, right? They're brilliant films. I don't care what funded them or who funded them. I will still watch them.
Yeah.
And same with
Yeah.
A.R. Rahman. Some of A.R. Rahman's best music or
Yeah.
Ilaiyaraaja's best music has lyrics written
Yeah.
by Vairamuthu, who's getting away with it, by the way, right? And just because he's politically well connected in Tamil Nadu, he's a
Yeah.
known offender. I think everybody just go Google
Yeah.
Vairamuthu. Interesting joke on Vairamuthu. The name Vairamuthu means Vairam is
Diamond.
Vairam is diamond and Muthu is
Gem.
pearl. So it's pearl. So diamond pearl. Except Vair Amuthu becomes stomach press. So Vair is stomach and Amuthu is press. So there are people who actually post nasty stuff or rather real stuff about Vairamuthu on Twitter, but don't want to be caught in the act because DMK is watching out for him. So they actually use the sobriquet stomach press when they talk about him on Twitter. So they avoid stomach press. But yeah, so should I stop listening to those songs by A.R. Rahman, who, by the way, also have great lyrics written by this guy, just because he's been cancelled? So art versus artist, where do you stand?
Obviously not. I mean, see, like there are multiple things to it, which is to say, when we go back to the whole Israel-Palestine thing, right? I'm very clear on where I stand, right? Which is that Israel is an occupying force conducting a genocide over a people that have done nothing to them, right? Hamas or no Hamas, like it's very, very clear as to what they've done, and there is absolutely no justification for it. Does that mean I'll stop wearing Puma or, like one of our friends said, I don't go to Starbucks anymore because, they're supportive?
I want to
No,
talk
man, I
about
mean,
Starbucks.
like-
Do you even know why Starbucks has been cancelled? This is extremely funny.
Starbucks
So
was cancelled by both sides, no?
that I don't know. They got cancelled by the whatever the
Why was
anti-Israel.
Starbucks cancelled?
So the Starbucks union. So Starbucks has
Yeah.
a union because it's obviously a huge workforce. It's unionized. So the Starbucks union took the Starbucks logo and created a new logo with the Starbucks logo, which was to express solidarity with Palestine. Right.
Right.
So they almost converted they made it look like the Starbucks logo. The Starbucks company stands with Palestine and is anti-Zionist or whatever, right? Which is problematic because Starbucks, at the end of the day, is a company. It's a global company which operates in multiple different places. If the company has a stance of its own, it's not for the people's union to come and say it. It's for the CEO of the company and the shareholders in the company. The biggest shareholders in the company need to say that this is what we want to stand for and this is what the company stands for. Then it becomes company line. But what the Starbucks union did was they took their logo and ran with it and said, "Hey, we are, we
Correct.
strongly condemn the attacks on in Palestine." And Starbucks company and said, "Hey, what the fuck? You can't do that.
Hey,
You can't do that
brand
with our logo.
guidelines.
You can't do that." Right? Suddenly one day people are like, "Hey, we didn't know that you're pro-Palestine." I'm like, "Oh, even we didn't know we were pro-Palestine." So the fact that they put out a statement and sort of censored their
Yeah.
their union is what got them cancelled. Nothing
Yeah.
makes sense in this, right? It's so funny, and now people are like, "Oh, boycott Starbucks." It's very funny.
Yeah.
There are many
So the
reasons to
problem-
boycott Starbucks. Like, who pays that much money for shitty coffee? Just make it at home. But well,
Okay, that's a separate discussion. But the problem is we are agreeing too much with each other. So let me ask you a different question. What do you think of pedophilia?
say more.
What do you mean say more? Like, what, like, okay, so pedophilia, we can all agree, is wrong, right? Morally reprehensible. It is basically people sort of having sexual thoughts about children, right?
Not thoughts. Not thoughts. We don't know
Okay.
anything about thoughts. We don't know how to legislate thoughts. But so we'll talk about actions. Yeah.
What is pedophilia? Okay, only if the action ensues, then you're saying then it needs to be a problem. Otherwise, not.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's impossible
Yeah.
for us to legislate thoughts, right? People
Correct.
have thoughts
Yeah.
all the time. I have
Yeah.
thoughts, you have thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Which we may or may
I'm
not.
not sure if this is like borderline cancellation stuff, right? So let us say a person. Okay, I'm gonna put it a different way. Let's say I'm just gonna say it, then we'll figure it out, right? So let us say someone is a pedophile, right? Which means that at this point he has thoughts about this thing, right? And
Okay.
on the internet there exists, let us say, child pornography. Him watching it, does that automatically mean that he deserves to die?
I think we've already said nobody deserves to die, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
by that logic, even an actual action, a pedophile himself or
Yeah.
herself who commits the crime also does not deserve to die. So definitely someone who has checked out porn online, probably not.
Wow. Okay. So I was thinking you'd say the reverse, which is why I want to introduce the word of the day, which is gerontophilia. You know what
What's that?
gerontophilia is? So gerontophilia is the sexual attraction to older people, elderly, right? Which means like you're into
Ageist. Yeah.
grandparent porn, right? And so if you were saying that someone's into that and they were watching that porn, I
Yeah.
wouldn't even question myself for asking the question in the first place to say why should it be, not okay, right?
Why
But
even gerontophilia?
realistically-
Well, I mean, let's just go with normal porn, right? Which all of us watch.
Obviously all-
And I know, and the kind of stuff that we watch is stuff that would be criminal to perform, right? A lot of the stuff that we watch.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, you've never watched non-consensual. You've never watched
like that.
non-consensual
Okay.
porn, right?
Interesting,
Yeah, exactly.
interesting. Okay, so
that's
wait,
a crime. So
No, once
you
again.
can't get cancelled for watching, right? So maybe you can. I don't know, who knows.
No, but hello. I think
Yeah.
it is criminal to watch. Obviously, child pornography is criminal, right?
Is it wrong to seek, watch, and be titillated by rape?
No, once again, wow. Okay, the point that I was trying to make.
I mean, because that's the through line, right, between the two.
It's interesting.
I'm sure you have. I'm sure I have. I can admit to it.
Dude,
So-
I stay in India where porn is banned, so I've no idea.
Oh, my poor Tony. How do you live?
No, once
Parota is your
again,
Levi's.
you've actually thrown a spanner in the works, but let me come back. But the original point was that gerontophilia and pedophilia are actually manifestations of brain damage in the exact same way. Like if it sort of triggers something, then you get attracted to elderly people. If it triggers something else when you were a child, you get attracted to kids, right? And realistically, in that sense, it is basically brain damage in that sense. And the important thing here is that consent is a line, right? Which you cannot violate at any point in time. And obviously, children are not consenting adults, right? Like they can't give consent. Therefore, it is morally reprehensible even to be uh, even for that porn to exist, right? That shouldn't happen in the first place. Whereas something like you're talking about, let's say, non-consensual depictions of porn, you would assume that it has been made with the consent of the
Oh,
performers.
okay.
I would
That's a
say
very
it is
technical, very, very
no.
technical point, but yeah, sure. I
I'm
get
saying
where you're coming from.
it is wrong to be titillated by a
A real rape,
yeah, exactly, as opposed to one which has been
which
enacted
is a make-believe rape. Yeah,
for
amazing.
consenting by
We,
consenting
we
adults
found
for
the way to
consenting.
make ourselves fully clean. So, yeah, let's celebrate.
But the point that I was trying to make originally was that when we talk about cancel culture, a lot of it stems also from what we consider normal and moral versus what how people are, right? And how people are cannot fundamentally be changed. Therefore, the line that you draw has to be consent, right? In this case, to say, are the parties in this act consenting adults? And that's about it. But you've basically like derailed my entire proposition by asking about.
I took it somewhere else. Yeah. Mm, okay. Yeah, fair. Consent is a good point, and I like how you said kids cannot be consulting adults because to start with, they cannot be adults. So forget the consenting part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I think we should definitely talk about at least my most the most hilarious cancel culture take that we've been exposed to in India. At least I have. I'm going
Yeah.
back to the year 2015 when Amir Khan came out and said something about the country becoming very intolerant. As a result of which, people wanted to cancel Snapdeal, which was the e-commerce platform that existed back then, rivaling Flipkart and Amazon. And there were Twitter mobs, of course. There were, and I think it's very possible that Snapdeal's competitors, in addition to the IT cell, actually started off some of these hashtags, try to get people to uninstall Snapdeal. Now, the fun part is not many people had installed Snapdeal, so lots of people had to first install it, then uninstall it, and then post screenshots, which they did. Except some people read the brief wrong. So they instead installed Snapchat and uninstalled Snapchat. So Snapchat suddenly saw an install,
And
boom.
ratings going down.
And ratings going down. So they saw their install numbers go up and then suddenly go down. And then their ratings going down in India. And they were like, what the hell happened? It was because of Amir Khan. But Snapchat had its own back a year or two later when Even Spiegel, the founder of Snapchat, said Snapchat doesn't plan to expand too much in low ARPU markets such as India. Right. At which point, Indian nationalists again were up in arms saying, how dare he says we are, a cheap market or low ARPU, low average revenue per user market. We shall now cancel Snapchat. So there were again Twitter trending topics that were done. The sad thing about Twitter doesn't make money when all this happens on Twitter. But these influencer companies that have, these 10 rupee influencers who will come and tweet something for you, they ended up making a lot of money. So suddenly one day you had down with Snapchat trending on Twitter. Except this time again, some people got the memo wrong. So they installed Snapdeal and then uninstalled Snapdeal. Snapdeal saw a further bump in it. That is restorative justice if you think about it, right? You
Amazing.
took a stray bullet for me. Tomorrow I will take a stray bullet for you. So there you go.
Amazing. I've come to realize that the hallmark of a good leftover lasagna recording is how uncomfortable it makes me feel. And by that metric, this is one
This one's up there.
super hit episode because I am feeling all sorts of discomfort in the pits of my stomach as to, have we covered things, but also
have we uncovered too much?
Uncomfortable. Yeah, have we uncovered? Anyway.
Indeed.
So I think that brings us to the logical conclusion of episode 12 of Leftover Lasagna, which will be titled something. You perform so what? What?
You performative, what is happened?
You perform
Yeah.
What is it?
Our sincere request to our audience after watching and listening to this episode is to not cancel us. Thank you.
Oh no, actually, our sincere request is please hit subscribe wherever you are watching
Yeah.
this, right? Whether it's YouTube or Spotify or Apple, please hit subscribe so you can stay tuned to us. And if you want to cancel us in the future, you need to keep a track record of all of this. Right? So even whether or not you want to cancel us or you want to listen to us, please hit subscribe. And also, if you're inclined on rating, please give us a 5-star rating. That actually helps us get discovered.
That will help more people discover us and our bigoted ideas so that more people can then cancel us. So please go for it. Hit the bell icon again and again. Hit the bell icon like Tio Salamanca. Ting, 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 ting.
Best meme of election week was Narendra Modi visiting
LK
Advani. People saying it is Gus Spring meeting Tio Salamanca.
Completely cracked me up. Yeah, that is the best one. On that note, we shall hit the end of this episode. Thank you so much for joining us on LOL. See you again next week.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Leftover lasagne.
Leftover lasagna.
Lasagna, no way.
It's a type of sandwich.
Some kind of gross pasta.
Leftover Lasagna is a
podcast
hosted by
my
Nitin
charge
and Tony uncle. Leftover Lasagna.
Very funny name.